for living with Bishop Dale C. Bronner.
And here's what I'll say to you. Whatever you want to see manifested in your life 10 years from now, you must plant seed for it right now. Whatever you want to see manifested 10 years from now, you must plant seed for it right now. And the best time to plant seeds for a tree was 10 years ago. The best time to plant seeds for a tree was 10 years ago. But the next best time to plant seeds for a tree is right now. No matter how you look at it, the next best time to plant seeds for a tree is right now. And as a part of conquering what's king in your life, I want you to realize that that means praying for and forgiving your enemies. Jesus taught us to love our enemies and do good to them who hate us. He taught us to bless them that curse us and pray for those who despitefully use us. Luke chapter 6, verse 27 and 28. And let me say this to you. Resentment and bitterness are blockade number one of our spiritual power. They are blockade number one of our spiritual power, resentment and bitterness. That's why Jesus tells us that whenever you stand praying, forgive if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father also in heaven may forgive you your trespasses. That's why we do that, because it is the number one, in fact, it's the only hindrance that Jesus ever mentions to faith or to your prayer life. He had just said to them in Mark 11:24, what things soever you desire when you pray, believe that you receive them and you shall have them. And in the next verse, he said, and when you stand praying, forgive if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father also in heaven may forgive your trespasses. And then I want you to notice what Peter said concerning prayers being blocked. He talked about it in 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 7. Likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker or the more delicate vessel, since they are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers are not hindered. So your prayers are not hindered. If you've got some unresolved conflict where you are holding resentment and bitterness, it is blockade number one to your spiritual power. Now, here's what that means. It means that there are just some things that you will have to let go. There are some things that you will just have to let go. Now, to let go means to stop dwelling on the things that you cannot change. To let go means to stop dwelling on the things that you cannot change. If you can't change something, let it go. Just let it go. Just let it go. I don't care who it is or what it is. If it's a situation on your job and if you can't change it, let it go. This is something that a man or woman in your life that keep doing, you're going to have the power to change it, let it go. Let it go. Just let it go. Let go. To let go means to stop dwelling on the things that you cannot change. Now, these 5 kings are hidden. They're tucked away in our own minds. And so you can't readily tell whether somebody is struggling with one of these kings or not. You know, when they came to Gilgal, Gilgal means the place of rolling back. It is a place where God commanded circumcision. But you'll never be able to deal with these kings until you learn how to control your flesh. And so God will sometimes hold time up in order for you to be able to gain your victory over your kings. This was the only time in the Bible, in Joshua chapter 10, where the sun stood still. And it will be as though your life is on hold in some areas. Your life is on hold until you bring these kings under control. God's desire is to get things out of us in order to make room for some other things. Now listen, you cannot apprehend that which you have not first identified. You cannot apprehend that which you have not identified. If somebody says to you, I want you to go over to the hardware store and get me one of those whatchamacallits. Have you ever sent somebody and said, get me one of those whatchamajiggums? If you have not identified it, you have no ability to apprehend that which you have not first identified. So here's the first step that I want you to go through is learn to self-assess. Learn to self-assess. If you don't, others will. And if others don't, God will. Learn to self-assess. Take inventory. That's why Scripture teaches when it comes to this coming to the Lord's table, it says, let a man, let a woman examine him or herself. Examine yourself. Take an assessment. Self-assess. Because if you don't assess yourself, somebody else will. And if nobody else will, God will. Leadership begins with self-awareness. Let me say that again. Leadership begins with self-awareness. Because real leadership is not about leading others. Real leadership is about leading yourself in a way that others are inspired to follow. But leadership begins with self-awareness. Because you can't improve a weakness or a blind spot that you don't even know about. And once you know better, you can do better. Then secondly, after you self-assess, you need to learn self-control. You deal with it and you make the correction. You will be surprised of the many things that we allow to control us instead of putting under control, like fear. Fear is a terrible thing that keeps so many people from their promised land. Human beings crave certainty, even when it limits them. And the best way to destroy fear is to do it until it no longer scares you. Did you know that that is the philosophy behind Toastmasters? Toastmasters will have the average person over a period of a few months to get up and do some short speeches. Some of them may be as short as 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 2 minutes. And then have other people to sort of critique you, to give you feedback, to give you praise when you've done a good job. And what they're doing is that they're trying to desensitize you to the fear. The number one fear is not the fear of death, it is the fear of public speaking. It's just getting up and it's like, oh my God. So they make people do it in little short spurts. If you get up and just start a little bit and then get affirmed, it is confronting your fear. Do the very thing that you fear, and fear will run away from you. But if you run from your fear, fear will chase you. Fear will chase you. And just realize that we fear failure, but there's no true success without failure. All success is born out of failure. All success is born out of failure. You control your tendency to forget what you have learned. When you get back into the trenches of your life, that's a great temptation. It is the tendency to forget what you have learned. We come into church, we learn principles. You can go to Sunday school, you can read your Bible, learn powerful spiritual truths, and then you get back in the trenches where the rubber meets the road and deal with a cantankerous spouse or some crazy little foul-mouthed child in your house, or you're on the job and dealing with an unappreciative manager. And you're in the trenches, and you know that we've talked about, you've got to have a good attitude. And now you are really having some challenges because this word about this good attitude, and now these people here that you want to take a rock when you're trying to let the love of Jesus come through you, and you're trying to kill them with kindness. And now all of a sudden you are being tried, and we end up losing our religion. Really, we lose our temper. Temper means control. Temperance is self-control. You lose your temperance, your ability to control yourself, and then the devil finds it. The devil finds it. So if you really don't want to forget the things that you have learned when you get back into the trenches, because it's like, where's Bishop now? Oh, Jesus. And we start cussing and doing all kind of stuff. I don't want to hear none of that stuff right now. What I want, and we just let it go. We get in the trenches and we forget everything that we've learned. Listen, you got to post that stuff on your mirror, put it on your telephone, on a memo pad. You got to get up in the morning and journal that stuff, write it in your journal. You've got to get that stuff down in your subconscious mind to where you are trained so that this thing is almost like a reflex. that comes out of my life, you've got to digest it and get it to be a part of you. Whatever you really struggle with, put it on your mirror, put it on your refrigerator, a place you know you're going to visit. You know, review it. If it's at a workstation, a place where you like to sit down and relax, put it there so you can review this thing, and it's ever before your eyes. It's before your eyes. It's before your eyes. Write it in your journal. Talk about it frequently. Talk about it. Whatever you talk about, you'll bring about. Whatever you talk about, you will bring about. Whatever you talk about, you will bring about. Talk about it. Talk about it. And you have to control your cynicism. May I tell you that cynicism stems from disappointment. Whenever you find cynical people, I guarantee you that they've had extreme disappointment and failure in their life. Because cynicism has its roots in disappointment. It stems from disappointment. When some people fail, they just shut down. They withdraw from the game, and then they grow cynical. It is their way, cynical people, it is their way to avoid the pain of getting hurt or becoming disappointed again. And that's why they become cynical. They don't want to risk getting hurt again. And then you have to learn how to self-direct. You learn self-control. You learn how to self-assess. You learn self-control. You learn how to self-direct. If you're going to really become the person that you need to be, you've got to self-direct. Don't wait for somebody else to get you started. You need to be a self-starter. Take initiative. Take initiative. Take initiative. Don't wait for somebody to tell you something. It's a mark of maturity when you do what needs to be done without anybody having to tell you. Doesn't it make you mad when you're in a place and the garbage is piling up and stinking and you're waiting on somebody to have to tell you to take the trash out? Wouldn't it be wonderful if a person would just be mature enough to say, you know what, I smell this trash stinking just like everybody else. I'm going to go ahead and take it out. I used up all of the paper and I'm going to replace it. If somebody were to take the initiative, learn to self-direct. When you self-direct, you get the strategy. There's a strategy. You don't have success without a strategy. There must be a strategy. Now, after you've identified your kings, you have to, number one, locate and confine them, or I should say bind them. You locate and confine them. This is what they literally did with these kings. They located them and then they confined them. And then you have to guard what you confine and then set boundaries. It's like they made a little prison for them. And here's why you have to locate them and confine them. It is because the devil is a defeated foe. He is not a destroyed foe. The devil is defeated. He is not destroyed yet. And no matter how saved you are, you don't get away from evil. We must be kept from evil. Evil won't be kept from you. Have you ever noticed that evil always has a way of finding its way to you? It always has. I don't know whether it's come to your computer, your television, just walk in your office. Evil has a way of making its way to you. You can be minding your own business and here come evil. Here you trying to fast. Hey, Carol, I got some chicken and a slice of chocolate cake. And it's always when you've made a decree that you're going to fast. Romans 7:21 says that when I would do good, evil is present with me. Matthew 6:13 says, but deliver us from evil. 1 Chronicles 4:10 says that thou wouldest keep me from the evil. So it's going to be there. You have to locate these things and confine them or bind them. Jesus gave us keys to the kingdom, binding and loosing. And certain things that need to be bound, you have to take the initiative to bind them. Number two, don't let what you haven't conquered keep you from conquering what you can. Don't let what you have not conquered keep you from conquering what you can. God can still use you while you are, hear this carefully, God can still use you while you are still dealing with issues and problems and still battling kings in your own life. You will make a grave mistake if you call yourself waiting until you've gotten everything fixed in your life before you allow God to use you. Do what you can do while you are still dealing with your kings. May I say this to you? Don't close the book when all God is asking you to do is to turn the page. Do what you can do while you're still dealing with your kings. You do what you can do. You'll notice from Philippians chapter 1, verse 15 through 18, how the Bible talks about how some preached Christ out of envy and rivalry, but others preached Christ out of goodwill. But even when their motives were wrong, God was still glorified because Christ was preached. Some folks may be able to save others even if they themselves are cast away. Don't wait until you've gotten everything fixed in your life before you allow God to use you. I cannot tell you how many crackpots God is willing to use. If he were waiting to use perfect vessels, Jesus would have been the only one that he ever used. And he never would have used anybody before Jesus, and he never would have used anybody after Jesus. But God uses flawed people who are still believing God, still working through their issues, still fighting their own personal demons. And one of the reasons that God will do that is so that no flesh will glory in his presence. So that God will get the glory out of this. This thing happened not because this person was so perfect, but because God was so good. God's gifts are perfect, but his gifts will flow through an imperfect vessel. Number 3, you put your feet on their necks. That is, subdue them. When they took these kings, they put their feet on the necks. When Joshua placed the kings under his feet, it represented that he had authority over them. Represented that he had authority over them. The devil belongs under your feet. Under your feet. Number 4, you kill them and you hang them as trophies. That's what they did with these kings. They killed them and they hanged them as trophies. Whatever you don't kill will eventually resurface in your life. I'm going to say that again. Whatever you don't kill will eventually resurface in your life. And then number 5, you lay them to rest. Bring closure. Bring closure to it. Lay them to rest. You're dealing with a king, you've had to slay it, you brought it under subjection, you subdued it, and you kill it, hang it as a trophy, but then you lay them to rest. Lay it to rest. God will sanctify your heart so that evil things will no longer be your desire. God's grace will never give you a license to sin. Let me say that again. God's grace will never give you a license to sin. Never fully place it on God to keep you from evil. Have you ever seen people blame God and say, God, why did you let me do such and such? And they act as though their getting into sin was God's fault. Never fully place it on God to keep you from evil. The Bible says, keep yourself, purify yourself. You know, we have a charge. Don't put that all on God, because if we fail, then we'll look at God and say, Lord, that was your fault. No. You are the custodian of this body. You're the custodian. And if you really want to have a successful journey in this life, let me give you 4 simple things. Number 1, you have clear objectives. Have clear objectives. The most common quality of leadership is vision. And the second most common quality is courage. But you have to have clear objectives. Your objectives come out of your vision. The most common quality of leadership is vision. And the second most common quality is courage. Number 2, have a plan, a clear plan of action. Have a clear plan of action. If there is no action to it, it is no threat. The devil is never afraid of anything that has no action to it. That's why this is a year of action. Have a clear plan of action. What are you going to do about what you see? You have a vision first, then you have a mission. Vision is what you see. Mission is what you do about what you see. That is your plan of action. It is your plan of action. It's your plan of action. Number 3, ask yourself the price question. Am I willing to pay the price to obtain what I want? Am I willing to pay the price to obtain what I want? And number 4, identify resistant forces. And the reason that you do that is so that you can prepare for them. When you identify a fear and then discipline yourself to move toward it, it will grow smaller and more manageable. But in contrast, when you back away from fear-inducing situations or persons, your fear will grow larger and larger. Identify resistant forces, things that are going to work against you, so that you know how to prepare for them. Whenever you're going down life's journey, coming into your promised land, have clear objectives, have a clear plan of action. Ask yourself the price question: am I willing to pay the price for what I want to obtain? And then you identify resistant forces. Well, I hope that you've gotten something out of this series on conquering what's king.
Thank you for watching Power for Living with Bishop Dale C. Bronner. Until next time, God bless you.